It's time for the big conversations. Telling stories of movers and shakers, of industry giants and daring professionals. It's time for the conversations that change your perspective on life. The kind of conversations that shape entrepreneurs and move careers forward. If you don't know where these conversations are found, we are sending you a GPS. But if you're listening to this voice right now, you are here. Welcome to the Growth Podcast. This is the GPS.
Welcome to another edition of the Growth Podcast. So glad you could join us. This week on the podcast, I know it's been some time, but we're back with the podcast. We have a very interesting guest for our podcast episode. He's a medical doctor, been in the practice for over decades, and we'll get into that conversation. He is from the Zambia National Blood Transfusion Service. Assuming most of you are very familiar with it, if you're hearing about it for the first time, this will be enlightening for you. But the doc obviously will give us a lot of insight, especially into the campaign that the Zambia National Blood Transfusion Service is running. My guest is Dr. Joseph Mulenga. Doc, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
How have you been?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. You have been a doctor for how many years?
Since 1990. So
1990.
Yeah, that's when I graduated.
That's 34 years.
That's right.
Okay. University of Zambia?
No, I went to Bulgaria for my basic medical training for 7 years. Came back to Zambia, 1990. Started work, 1991, thereabout. And then started the blood service on the Copper Belt in 1993 to date. I had some trainings in Edinburgh at the Royal College of Physicians. That's where I did my specialization in blood transfusion. And then I went on to do an MBA at the University of Lincoln in the UK. And then I had a lot of other trainings all over the world, in different fields.
We have a tradition on the podcast. I've got these cards. I want you to pick any four of them. So there's a question on the card. So when you just pick any card, any four cards. Yes, randomly. Any four cards randomly. Yeah, I knew you'd pick red. Please, just turn them around. There's a question, ask it and give us an answer.
Do you want me to read out the question?
Yeah.
What beliefs would you want to pass on to your children or grandchildren? The beliefs to be God-fearing, 1. 2, to be passionate about what they do. And 3, to love people.
Okay, interesting. Next card.
What are your core values? Very simple. I'm very hardworking. I don't want to praise myself, but I like to focus on anything that I touch. It has to be sustainable. It has to be long-term. So everything that I touch tends to last. So I like resilience. I like to be passionate about, anything that you put your mind to. But also, I love humanity. I want to live well with people, to love people, according to God's commandments.
All right. Card number 3.
What key life advice did you learn from children? I love children. By the way, I should have been a pediatrician. One of the reasons I went into blood transfusion service is that I needed to save children who were dying due to lack of blood. Before starting the blood service, children on average were certifying 10 to 15 children per day, dying due to lack of blood as a result of malaria. And then when we started the blood service and created what was the bank then, we were able to reduce that mortality to almost 0. So that was a departure from me being a pediatrician to becoming a transfusion expert. I love children because they're innocent, they're unassuming, they're not prejudiced. But also, when you respond appropriately to a child, you get the immediate response. There's nothing like playing games or hiding, being manipulative like adults are because of survival issues. Adults tend to self-preserve sometimes, consciously, but also self-destruct. So in between, there are all sorts of things that might happen, but children do it and they respond as it is. So you get the truth from them. If you act appropriately to a child, you get the actual response that is truthful.
All right. Interesting. Some interesting answers. Let's get the last one.
What moment do you wish could relive and even change? And even change, relive and even change? Well, where I grew up, I grew up in the compound in Chimwembe. That is my upbringing is from that background. I love the strength that gave me. I love the way I look at life. It's basically from that outlook. Anytime I meet a challenge, I always tell myself, what could be worse than growing up in there? The only worst thing that can happen is me going back there. But I said, even that would be fine. I just go and tell stories to those people. When I meet them, I say, yes, I was a doctor. I used to fly. I used to go all over the world. They'll be saying, no, you are telling lies. Yeah, I would really love to go back there probably and make a difference at that level. Yeah, because for me, that's a barometer for success.
Okay. No, thank you for your answers, Doc. So you said that you established the blood bank in 1993.
Yeah, that was the starting point, yes.
That was the starting point, and was away from the motivation of saving children. What took you there?
Oh, yes, because I'd been practicing medicine for 2 years at that point, and I'd done rotations in surgery. I'd done rotations in pediatrics, and that was my experience there. Then I went to do obstetrics and gynecology. I also encountered something unpleasant there. There was a woman who had delivered and developed what is called a tonic uterus. Basically, what that means is that after delivery, the uterine mass of the womb does not contract and the bleeding doesn't stop. That condition is very, very dangerous. It's painless. The woman would not be responding, not be reactive. So blood is just pouring quietly. And I was on call as a young doctor, and I encountered this case. And this woman was lying in bed, covered in some bed sheet with a child. She had delivered a live, bounced baby boy, and she was bleeding, and she was not aware. The nurse discovered that and called me. And when I reached there, I knew there was impending, fatality. So I quickly rushed her to theater to try and do what we normally do. Maybe what could be the causes? Maybe you've retained some products within the womb which would making the uterus not to contract. And then try to get blood from the blood bank. There was nothing. And this was at night. And really I was helpless. And I lost that life. That woman, it's my first encounter with that fatal outcome, And then the two incidents in pediatrics and that very case, when I was asked if I could stop mainstream practice and start the blood service. And the question that I was asked by my professor then was, if you became the best surgeon, the best physician at a hospital, you chose, and then you became, a blood transfusion expert and saved the whole country to start national blood service to cover all Zambians, where would you get the maximum pleasure? Where would you impact more in terms of human life? It was very clear to me that by setting up the national blood service, then I would be reaching the whole Zambia, and I would be saving more lives than if I just focused on one particular specialty and one hospital as the best surgeon or the best pediatrician or the best physician.
Did that woman's son survive?
Yes, of course. I had no follow-up, but of course the encounter was very traumatic. As a young doctor, I really felt devastated at that point.
Okay. So you tell me what it took to start a blood bank. Yes, you are asked, you accept, and then what?
So the government then was looking for support from external partners to help prevent the transmission of HIV, because the focus then was HIV. There was a realization at that point that one of the most efficient ways to transmit HIV was through blood transfusion. So if a country did not have a safe blood supply, you can actually infect the entire nation. So the European Union at the time were looking for countries that they were supporting. I think they were supporting 29 developing countries, and Zambia was one of them. And one of the conditions was to follow WHO principles of setting up a nationally coordinated system, so that you have a national program that covers the whole country, and then you put in certain steps to be able to make the blood safe, like relying on voluntary blood donors, recruitment campaigns, and then testing, mandatory testing for infectious markers that are blood transmissible, and then making sure that there's appropriate use of blood by prescribers in the ward. So this whole strategy put together at the national level, was being supported by the European Union. Now they're looking for doctors who would be interested in taking up this challenge. It was a new field. There was no peerage. There was no precedence. So it was like leaping in the dark, because you have no one to guide you. You are just on your own. So it's a big decision. I got some pushback from colleagues who thought probably my career was wasted. What would you be doing in blood bank? It seemed a very narrow field at the time, which is not the case. And everybody believed that once the HIV issue is sorted, this career will come to an end. And I would just be left hanging there, lost. Yeah. But as you can see, it has been growing, and I've been there since. So that was really the issue. They were looking for a doctor. I was asked if I was willing. It was at the point when I was supposed to go for rural posting. In fact, I had received a letter already from the ministry to go to Solwezi, to run Solwezi General Hospital as a director there. Then they gave me a choice. If I took the blood transfusion route and started the blood bank, then I would not be going to Solwezi. I can just now start, being in Kitwe and start the whole blood transfusion program. So I said, fine, this is exciting for me. And that there began the story.
What is the decision-making process like when you're going into unfamiliar territory? Because I know that there are a lot of young people who are faced with a decision where you don't even have anyone to ask for advice because no one's ever done it. You get the point, right? So for example, you with the blood, bank, there's no one to ask. There's no blood bank. It was starting from scratch. How do you make decisions in times like that where you are going into, like you said, unfamiliar territory? You don't know if it will work out. You don't know and then also for you, it's not like you had no choice. You've got Solwezi waiting for you. And then you've got the blood bank that you have no idea whether it will work or not. If the HIV thing doesn't work out, what happens to you? How do you make a decision when you're going into a strange environment?
Actually, I get asked that question even by my own children. How do I do the things that I do? I think for me, when I came back from Bulgaria that time, Zambia was going through a very, very difficult time. 1990, 91, all the hospitals, there were no doctors, they had left. I remember when I reported at the ministry then, I wanted to remain at UTH because I wanted to go into postgraduate training very quickly, and I thought if I'm posted at the UTH, it would be a quicker way. But I was reminded by the director then that you come from Kitwe, there are no doctors at Kitwe Central Hospital. Go and save your own people. So when I reported at Kitwe, I didn't look back. I was just working. Now, when I was selected to start the blood service, for me, I was looking at two things. One, it was being funded by the European Union. I'd come from Europe. I knew what that organization was. And I knew that would be a way of assisting government to sponsor my scholarship postgraduate training. So I wanted to achieve postgraduate training as quickly as possible so that I specialize and then impact, society, but also personal growth in terms of career progression. So I could see if I could do this job so well, stand out, and I would be able to convince the sponsors that they would actually sponsor my education. And it turned out to be that true, in fact. So me, I was looking at personal growth. I was looking at specializing in advanced countries where medical practice is advanced. And I knew the government doesn't have that much resources to sponsor all of us with so many doctors. I know the fashionable training that time was masters in public health. People would go to UK maybe for 1 year. So you would admire, okay, he's gone for 1 year, he's got a scholarship. It was like, this is a privilege. Some people are privileged, others not. So I had to find my own way of achieving my goal. And I saw my destiny being in my hands. If I did it so well, I stand out, I will be able to get to where I want. And that's what happened. So I didn't look back, really. I enjoyed the job. I still enjoy the job. I couldn't have done anything else.
All right. 1993, you said, right?
Yes.
When I started the blood bank. How then, 31 years ago, how was people's attitude towards donating blood?
Firstly, the system was very fragmented. It was hospital-based. Each hospital was collecting its own blood. They were using technicians in the lab. And if you went to any hospital and you went to the laboratory, if you looked at the dirtiest part of that particular laboratory. That is where this so-called blood bank would be. It was really very, very rudimentary, I think almost at a primitive scale. We didn't test for the infectious markers. The commonest one was syphilis. We could test, I think the kits were readily available for syphilis. There were no kits for HIV, there were no kits for hepatitis B, there were no kits for hepatitis C. So you can imagine what was happening in terms of transmission of those infections those days. So it was very, very disorganized. And that is where I saw my impact, that I could change that into a nationally coordinated system, have a system of standardizing, the collection, testing, processing, and also the use of blood across the whole country. And that was the mandate that I was given by the government to try and achieve that for Zambia. Of course, with the support from the trainings and also exposure to other more advanced nations where the practice was already advanced.
So in the 1990s, it was popular for someone to just wake up and say, I've gone to the hospital to give blood.
Basically, they used to go to prisons sometimes those days, and they would give them cigarettes
As
and
a reward?
alcohol. Yes, as a reward. It was all very, very, I said it was very, very primitive and totally unsafe. I don't want to think about it. I don't know what happened to those people who received blood in those days, But like all over the world, blood transfusion evolved through upheavals. It evolved through, a lot of difficult times. There have been countries where they have done lookbacks to see how many transfusions, how many infections do they do. I don't know if you read that report in the UK, where they looked back, and in fact there was a very, very big case where people were demanding billions. What happened in the past when these tests were not mandatory, they were not being put in place. There was no policy, in short, in terms of blood transfusion. It was all very, very basic and rudimentary.
Okay. I remember when I was in high school, I think your team used to come and they'll give you sugar, and that's what blood was associated with. They give you sugar and whatnot and biscuit. So you think there's no sugar at home, let me give. What are you using now to, get people to give?
And that's one of the misconceptions. There's a medical indication that for X amount of blood that you lose, you need 3 times the amount of fluids. So if you talk about one single donation episode, that's 450 mils, which is close to half a liter. So half a liter, if you multiply by 3, it's 1.5 liters. It is mandatory from a medical indication that you need to replace those fluids as soon as possible. So how do you get to replace the fluids? 1.5 liter. That's why we give the milk, 500 mils, Coca-Cola, 500 mils. There's still that 500 mils that is left. That's why we give the sugar and probably the biscuit, just to make it possible that the donor is encouraged immediately after donation to take a lot of fluid so that the blood volume is restored almost immediately. So it's not a payment, it's not an incentive, it is a medical indication that you restore the blood volume as quickly as possible so that you don't impair the health of the donor.
You mentioned misconceptions. What are the common misconceptions or myths when it comes to blood giving?
They are abound. 1, you can get infected by donating blood. 2, you can die, you can faint. We did some engagement with the traditional leaders in the past because our people in the rural population, they were being considered as Satanists. These are Satanists, they get our blood and they do satanic rituals on the blood, to the extent that you get a lot of hostilities from the population to try and, beat our staff, in a very, very brutal way. So as a way of, impacting behavior change and communicating appropriately, we engage the traditional leaders who are the champions at that level. And we try to engage them so that they bring out the myths. Basically, we're trying to understand what's the barrier between the community and blood donation and blood transfusion. What is the barrier? From their perspective, how do they see these barriers? So we pose the question, have they ever benefited or known somebody who has benefited from a transfusion? It was very clear. In nearly every family, there's someone who had benefited either through delivery or they were sick in hospital. So it was clear people knew the benefits. But why still this hostility and this misconception? What could be the problem? The issues that came out were very, very revealing about, the deep-seated fears that we have, in our psyche sometimes. So one of the things was that in the past, there were people who were abducting children at Bamunyama. You know what I mean? They used to call them in villages. So they associated that with ourselves, that would go in villages probably and capture. It's a way of enticing them so that you sell them for maybe for your organs and everything. Yeah. So that was number one. Number two, there was a lady chief who said, we feel sometimes that if your husband donates for the next 3 months, he won't touch you, meaning you lose your sexual drive because of your donation. But also they say, how can someone's blood be put in another human being when you are not related? If this person has got epilepsy, for example, has got some of those diseases, would not be transferred, even those spirits that are demonic, in this particular individual, wouldn't you transfer this into another person? They're quite deep-seated fears that are there. So it takes quite a lot to overcome that and then make everyone believe. But in a broader sense, I would say blood transfusion is really Western medical practice. It's not an African traditional thing. Yeah, it's really modern, Western medical practice. So we're just catching up. And there's also this big lag in terms of our psyche and how we view blood. It's always associated with fear. Even at the sight of blood, some people faint. But it's amazing that this is life itself. I mean, our female colleagues monthly, they experience that. For them, I think probably it's even, it's a normal thing. During delivery, there's a lot of blood that is lost. But how do we have this disconnection with the life-giving fluid and the type of psyche and archetypes that we develop within our brain? That is need to be overcome, but it requires a concerted effort.
So what you're telling me is that I can not get any of those traits or any of those, maybe someone that is conditioned, the one giving the blood, nothing.
Of course not. It's totally disconnected. This is just a very, very complex tissue. Blood itself has got cells that are life-giving. It has got a fluid that transports, nutrients in the blood. In the whole body for you to function properly. The gases that you breathe in and out. That's a function of blood. There's so many functions that are not yet discovered. It's what sustains life itself.
Okay, we're talking about misconceptions. Some people may think someone who is, I'm trying to be very careful with my words, someone who is, let me use this. Let's say I weigh 60 kilograms.
Mm-hmm.
And the assumption is that the one who should give blood is maybe someone who weighs 150 kg. People who are bigger should give blood. As someone like me who's small, I may faint, like you said. Just talk to me about that. What is that really the case?
No, there is a medical indication and a cutoff. An adult would carry about 70 mils of blood per kg body weight. That's what will determine your total blood volume. So, for example, if you weigh 70 kilogram, multiply that by 70, you'll be somewhere around, 4.9 liters. So it's your lean weight that determines, how much blood you have. You multiply that by 70, you get the total blood volume for each individual. Now, there's a cutoff. For us in Zambia, we say 50 kilogram and above. What we are saying is that for that amount of blood which we've determined, like a unit, which is 450 mils, if we collect that, it should not have any deleterious effect on your health at the point of donation. You'll be able to replace without any untoward effect on your health. And that is a medical cutoff. It's really purely balancing between total blood volume that you have based on your weight, and if we collect this percentage, which is usually between 12 to 15% of your total blood volume, having taken this will not have an effect on your health at all. And that's why we say blood donation is 100% safe. It will not harm you, and immediately you don't feel any illness or any harmful effects on your body. So it's purely medical. So we say 50 kilogram in Zambia is a cutoff for you to be able to donate 450 mils of blood at intervals of 3 months for a male and 4 months for a female.
Oh, so you can't give every month?
No, we want you to be able to replace the blood in that interval because, like I mentioned, blood has got so many constituents, such as the fluid part, which is immediately restored through the fluids that we give. And then we have the red cells that have to be replaced after some time. And then we have the platelets, we have a lot of other proteins that the body then within that interval should be able to restore.
Also, before I donate, they're asking when was the last time you donated?
That's one of the mandatory questions. Have you ever donated blood before? And when did you last donate blood before? When did you last donate your last donation?
Okay.
So that we can determine if you are due or not due.
Okay, so the National Blood Transfusion Service, you keep referring to it as a blood bank. So how many liters of blood do you have right now in your blood bank?
I'll tell you about the national blood needs. How much blood does Zambia need? It should be 2% of the population. So if we are 20 million, we should be having 400,000 units of blood to be adequately supported throughout.
400,000 liters of blood?
Well, each unit is 450 mils. So we need 450 sachets, those bags of 50 mils annually to be able to be self-sufficient in blood and blood products and cover all the medical conditions that require blood transfusion support.
So do we have in excess or we are falling short?
We've always been behind. We're playing catch-up all the time. But after introducing these campaigns and reaching out to the people and emphasizing the importance of voluntary blood donation, the numbers are ramping up. We've got a 3-year strategy for Zambia to attain that figure by 2026.
So ideally, who should give blood?
A male, female from the age of 16 and above who is in good health, does not have exposure to blood transmissible infections such as HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, syphilis, weighs above 50 kilograms, like I said, or body weight, and these intervals that are permissible within the donation frequencies that are allowable medically, and is willing to volunteer, because we don't pay blood donors. We emphasize volunteer blood donation, because if you were paid, blood donors will be attracting a different category of people whose motive would just be focused on material gains and not saving a life. The danger to that is that they would not be able to disclose their lifestyles, confidential history that we take for every donor to determine if they are eligible to donate or not, because we need to answer 2 important questions. One, is the donation safe for the donor? We need to protect the donor. Do they have sufficient blood? 2, we need to protect the recipient. Is this donation from this donor going to infect the recipient? How do we balance that equation? It's a very complex one. So there are questions within our questionnaire that are directed to protect the donor, and the questions that are directed towards protection of the recipient of blood donation.
What is the saddest story you've heard of someone who died because they could not access blood?
For me, they are bound. Each time there is no blood in the blood bank, I know someone is dying somewhere in this country. There are quite a lot of stories. I mean, I've been practicing blood transfusion medicine for 31 years, so it's really, it's a very unpleasant situation. In fact, when there's no blood, I rarely go out, because I know deep down in my heart, women in labor, unplanned for, they go into the hospital to deliver. They don't know the outcome of that delivery. They deliver successfully, and then they go into these complications, postpartum hemorrhage, and it becomes an emergency. Now there's no blood available. Sometimes you have what is called antepartum hemorrhage. They start bleeding before they deliver, impairing the life of the child as well as the mother. There are moments when we've lost both the child and the mother. Moments when the child is delivered successfully and then you lose the mother. And then there are fatal accidents that occur. You see all these fatal accidents on the road. You have to take them to the immediate health facility that has got sufficient stocks of blood to respond to massive blood losses that people incur as a result of trauma. Those are very, very unpleasant cases. And then we have cancer patients who systematically lose the blood cells because of the disease. And then you've got to support them continuously with blood and also platelets, some other cells that normally get affected because of the diseases. And if you see these conditions, it's heartbreaking if you can do nothing about it. You can't support them when they need it. The therapy that is required to treat cancer affects the whole cells, including the normal cells. So you require blood transfusion support during the time before they initiate the therapy, during the therapy, and after therapy. So without blood transfusion support, you can't talk about cancer treatment. It's totally, it's not workable.
Doctor, in the midst of sad stories like the ones that you've highlighted, then you have people in hospitals, unscrupulous people in hospitals, who sell blood.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking for me. And we've attempted as a service to try and see in our little way what we can do. We emphasize that blood is not for sale. It's voluntary given. The government pays for that. And we don't discriminate between private hospitals, military hospitals, faith-based, and government. We budget for the 20 million people. That's how we look at it. So each time that we are pushing for resources from government, we're trying to cover 20 million people. So when the government puts in resources, it's trying to cover the entire nation. Unfortunately, people see an opportunity to turn it into a commercial, activity and raise money through that. I know we're challenged economically, but really our conscience should tell us, look, the people who need blood have no choice. There's no one who is willing to say, I want to be transfused. Your health is compromised, and usually there's no other solution other than the transfusion itself. This is a person who is in a compromise, is vulnerable, and is in panic. And then you see an opportunity to turn this unfortunate situation into a way of raising money in between. There's what we call the interface. When blood leaves the blood bank and it reaches the patient, the courier system in between. The nurses, the doctors in the ward, and the porters, plus our staff who do the testing and issue the blood. All these players at any of these points can turn this into a commercial, can see the opportunity to make money. And that's why it's very, very complex for us at the service to be involved in policing and checking this particular interface between the patient and the time that blood is released from the blood bank. I call it a criminal offense. Each time people call me and say, why don't you report to the police? I'm the provider of the service. I'm not the one who enforces the law. It's a criminal offense to trade in human body parts because blood is a tissue. It's as good me, getting your heart and selling it, getting your bones and selling them, your cornea from the eyes and selling them. There's no difference with blood, and that is why it's such a sensitive, tissue to handle. And if anybody tries to trade in that, it's illegal. It's a police case. So people try to put so much pressure on the blood transfusion service, but I always say no. It's a criminal offense. Report to the law enforcement officer so that they investigate and get these culprits. If we can get one or two jailed, probably to send some shockwaves and probably
the saddest part for me, Doc, is that these people who sell blood are medical personnel who took an oath to save human life. And you see someone, because I've heard stories where you go to the counter, you want blood, and you're told there's no blood. You go back. As you're going back, you find someone else the same. They got blood. How?
So you see the interface that I prescribe. I started with the bedside. There's a nurse, there's a doctor. The one who prescribes, who sees, okay, this patient needs blood, is a doctor. Gives instructions to the nurse. In fact, he's the one who even signs. And the nurse coordinates, the whole process of drawing the samples for cross-match, whatever. And then they give to the courier system, who is a porter, or sometimes the relatives, or sometimes the doctor himself, or sometimes the nurse. Then this person now comes to the blood bank. In the blood bank, we've got a team that does the blood grouping and cross-matching. They're the custodians of these products who do the cross-matching and issue. So there are multiple players. It's a very complicated interface. And if any of them decides to turn that into, a criminal activity, it's difficult for us. That's what I'm saying. It requires more specialized units actually to be able to focus on this what I might call malpractice.
All right. You launched the I'm a Hero campaign. What's the campaign about, and are you attaining the results that you envisaged?
Okay, you remember I talked about the national needs, which should be 400,000 units, and our goal is by 2026 to reach that number. So that we've got a communication strategy, and under that there's a campaign to actually reach out to all the donors, because one of the challenges people, refer to lack of information. People didn't ask us to donate, and that's why we don't know anything about donation. So we needed to start, a massive mass media campaign, a social marketing, campaign about this idea of blood donation, so that we can bridge the gap between, the needs of the country and what is available. What we've worked out is that if we reached out to 250,000 Zambians, with mass messaging all over, and be able to convert at least 200,000 of them into actually blood donors, and make them donate at least twice per year. So if you get 200,000 from 250, and they donate twice per year, you've got your 400,000 magic number. So the Ama Hero is just one step towards this mass recruitment, what we call DRRR campaign, which is donor recruitment, retention, and recall strategy, so that we reach out to all the Zambians. No one should say, I'm not donating because I don't know what blood donation is all about. This message has never reached to me. I've never been asked. We need to reach out to every Zambian so that they are aware. Willfully, knowingly, they decide not to be blood donors or to be blood donors. Not that they were not approached, they were not informed. So this is just one step towards, fulfilling this communication strategy.
All right, that's an interesting bit, and but then also, Doc, people, I think, even just blood groups. I don't know. Do you know your blood group? Do you know your blood group? Oh, I don't know my blood group. He doesn't know his blood group. I'm sure if I walk out, people don't know what the blood group is.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of work really that you have to do for this campaign. But then also, who are you? I know you mentioned that those that donate are 16 going up.
Mm.
Are you going into schools? Are you heavy on traditional media? And also, when you reach out to these people, what are you doing also for those that are already converted? Those who believe, and that, because I know there's some people who don't. You don't have to struggle to explain to them that you should give blood. They understand the value of the blood. They understand that it's saving lives. So those ones are already converted. But those that, for example, have these myths, how are you getting across to them? Those ones that even just, because there are others, for example, who I would like to give, but just the idea of a need to just, sends chills down my spine.
Yeah, but the way it is worked out in Zambia is that the bulk of our donors are between the age of 16 and 25. They make up over 80% of our blood donors, mostly in the peri-urban and rural areas. The urban population, for some reason, the numbers are not so encouraging. Like Lusaka itself, for example, you don't get that many donors within the Lusaka. But once we go outside Lusaka, and as we go outside the periphery, that's when the numbers start ramping up. So if you just look at that category, from 16 to 25, they will mainly be in secondary schools, upper secondary schools, because of the age cutoff.
Yeah.
And then there will be in universities and colleges. And there will be people who are just starting work in farms, in industry. But the bulk of our donors is in schools, boarding schools, day schools, as well as colleges and universities. But in the last few years, we've seen the villages actually now, they are coming on board, and we are getting a lot of blood donation at community level in the rural areas, which is a very, very encouraging, response from the population. Yeah, the fear of pain is one of the myths, because blood donation itself is painless, simply because the needle, and that's why we insist on quality inputs into our blood system. Zambia uses some of the best gold standard blood bags in the world. Why? Because the needle that is there is a silicone needle. It's a Japanese needle. all blood bags in the world use that needle because the science that has gone into it, it's very, very specific. It's patented. Other people will try to buy blood bags from anywhere. If it's not a silicone needle, it means we'll have problems. The science is quite simple. We are looking for a vein. That's where we collect blood from. On top of the vein, there's the skin. Now, the skin, which is lying above the vein, has a lot of nerve endings. The pain sensations are transmitted through nerves. Okay? So if you can avoid hitting the nerves, there will be no pain. Now, that needle, the way it's manufactured is that it goes at an angle through the skin that does not excite those nerves. And then once you are in the vein, inside the vein, there are no nerve endings. There are no nerves at all. So there's no sensation of pain that comes and sends to the brain that there's pain at this site. So if you get a trained nurse, we call them phlebotomists, the ones who draw blood. You teach them how to look for a good vein in one move.
On a lighter note, where I'm laughing, Doc, is we've seen stories of this nurse tries to find the vein. She fails. Calls the friend. The friend also. So you find for people it's a very... Because I've seen that even you find with children, for example. I don't know what's wrong with nurses and not finding the vein. People say the mosquito can just find it, eyes closed in the dark.
There are two aspects here. When we're talking about blood donors, the veins are the larger veins. So those you can see, and if you are trained, you will always get it. Now, when it comes to the ward, when you want to set up now the IV line in children, for example, to get access, even to set up a transfusion itself, because it should also go through the veins when you do the transfusion. That is where there is a challenge. You need people who are trained. I told you I was going to be a pediatrician myself. And that's what I enjoyed most about that practice, is that if a child comes dehydrated, is it anemic, you know that if you don't find a good vein, the child will die. So you specialize and focus, make sure that you are skilled to actually get the vein at all costs. And we know which parts. Sometimes if you fail through the arms, you go to the scalp. You see a lot of children have been shaved.
Yes.
It's just to get the vein in a short time as possible, because children, every minute counts when you come across a child. If you don't act within a particular time, you lose a child. So you need to make sure that you secure that line as quickly as possible. And that's a lifeline where you're going to give all the fluids to rehydrate and the transfusion itself, and also to administer certain medicines intravenously. So the training of doctors, nurses, some people have got, in every field that people are just born with certain particular skills. It's all over, even mechanics. There are those mechanics, who just know what to do. He attends to the car, it will be done in no time. We had a lot of cold chain equipment that were not working in the blood bank for a very long time, and we couldn't find someone to repair. There's a guy I was being told yesterday who just appeared from nowhere. He's repairing everything, and everything is working. And I'm saying, this is God sent, But a lot of people have tried to do the same thing, but they have failed. And so what I'm trying to say, in every field, there are people who have got a particular acumen, particular gift. Not to say that people cannot be trained, but other people require more training, more effort to be able to attain particular skill set.
All right. So I'm a Hero campaign. Obviously, if you come to me and tell me that you must give blood, I think I would like to know where the need is. My question, Doc, is what are the conditions right now that desperately need this blood? I know you mentioned that there are children, there are women in labor. If you had to categorize this and says, look, these are the majority who, if you do not give blood, we're going to lose the majority of lives because they are dealing with these conditions.
Yeah, I think the bulk of the needs are in the children under the age of 5 because of malaria. Malaria leads to anemia because those parasites reside in the red cells, and in their replication cycle, they burst the red cells and cause secondary anemia in the children. So that is number one. Followed by pregnant mothers in childbirth. Postpartum hemorrhage is one of the major killers of our women. So if the two put together will constitute about 60% of the patient groups that require blood transfusion. Followed by cancer patients right now as we're speaking. We've got one of the highest cases of cancer in the world, cervical cancer. And to treat cancer, you need blood transfusion support. Not just red cells, you need platelets as well, before, during, and after the therapy. Yeah, so that is the way. And then trauma and major surgeries. If you go to the National Heart Hospital on the airport road, they do very complicated surgeries with the heart. They open the heart, they repair the defects or the abnormalities that are there, and then they close. During that process, they require huge amounts of blood and blood components for a patient. Sometimes one patient might need as many as 30 units per procedure. So when we are dealing with those more sophisticated procedures, the amount of blood that is needed for those patients is very, very high. Really, and then we have common causes such as HIV. We've got people who've got blood disorders that are born with, leukemia cases, hemophiliacs, sickle cell patients. It's also another patient group that requires a lot of blood, because right now in Zambia we're able to do more sophisticated automated red cell exchange for sickle cell patients, and every procedure will require maybe 5, 6, 10 units per patient for you to actually remove all those abnormal cells which are sickled in sickle cell and replace them with normal donated cells that will prolong their life without getting into the crisis that normally impairs their health and impairs their quality of life.
All right. No, thank you very much, Doc. The I'm a Hero campaign, I know you mentioned what your target is, but what does success look like for you, where you say, okay, this campaign really has yielded what we're looking for?
We want to be present in the public eye permanently. Every Zambian should know the importance of blood donation. This has to be sustainable. It's not a one-off. We haven't found a substitute for blood. We can't buy blood in the pharmacy. We can't manufacture blood. The only source of blood are the humans. So if we can keep this message long enough in the public eye, as long as the source of this form of therapy are humans, we should keep everyone informed and be aware. So for me, success would be when, like marketing an idea is a bit more sophisticated and more complex, which is blood donation. It's an idea. It's not like marketing Coca-Cola, milk, and all that. Those are tangibles. So you're marketing an intangible, an idea. So it requires a different skill set from a marketing sales perspective that would actually sell an idea in a sustained way to retain your presence in people's mind long term. So more Zambians are informed about blood donation. From the day that you probably are in primary school, you've got knowledge about what blood donation is. When you become of age 16, then you know what your role is for society, to support society, and also social responsibilities. If we can inculcate this in our culture, the culture of giving, the culture of, saving lives, if that can be sustained, then we'll have done our job.
Doc, thank you very much. So someone has watched this podcast. They know about the I'm a Hero campaign. I want to give blood. Where do I go?
We've got 3 modes of reaching out to our donors. We've got fixed sites, which are called provincial blood centers. These are buildings where the collection can be done, tested, processing, and stored. So if you go into the UTH, you find the blood center there. If you are in the Northwestern Province, you go to Solwezi Hospital, you find the blood. If you go to Kasama, in every province there's a provincial blood center. So those are called fixed sites. Then we have mobile outreach programs that are of 2 types. One is within the vicinity of the town. For example, we've got local blood collection at Mulenga Girls, at Matero, at Livala Secondary School, or at a market, at a shopping mall. So the team leaves in the morning and comes back in the evening, having collected. Then we've got long outreach programs, what we call camping programs. They leave on Sunday, they go and camp in a village, for example, for Nikatete, for a week. They go on Monday. The team will have gone there to sensitize the population. They have got fit sites where they have done the motivation, the education, and everything in readiness for the team that will come the following week to do the actual blood collection at those sites where education and sensitization have taken place. So they'll be there for a week and keep sending the blood to us and come back on Saturday. So camping sessions, fixed sites at the blood centers as well as the local sessions.
Doc, thank you very much. I think this has been very insightful. Blood donation, I think, is not strange to most of us. I think everyone knows about blood, and you either know someone who needs it, or you know someone who died because they couldn't access it. But having a conversation like this, for me, really gives a different perspective, because the numbers that you mentioned, these people that die, we hear that, a woman died in labor, and it ends there. But the way you've broken it down, now I see, okay, it's a problem I could have helped solve.
Yeah.
And I feel that's what the Hero campaign is about. And the Hero
correct.
campaign is about you can do something about
Yeah.
it. There are some stats that you hear and say, and it ends there. But these are numbers that you can say, okay, I think I can do something about it. And I'm very grateful that you spared the time to come through. I don't know if the Zambia National Blood Transfusion Service is on Facebook. How do people follow you? How do they get more information?
Yes, we've got an active Facebook page. In fact, the Hero campaign has contributed a lot to the feed on our Facebook page. Yeah, it's very, very active. In Zambia, I think Zambians, mainly Facebook is the number one preferred, sort of digital platform for information sharing. So yeah, we're very, very active. WhatsApp, we have WhatsApp groups, we have Instagram. And you talked about traditional media. That is where we haven't done very well because of the costs. And we need to strengthen that aspect in terms of having activations, having champions, having influencers, and the whole mix of how you can sustainably retain this in people's minds.
Doc, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.